Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IES. A very good evening to all of you, and I welcome you all to the next session of the knowledge series. Today's session, as you can see on the screen, is on one of the most significant acts passed by the Indian Parliament. Today we'll be discussing about the Forest Rights Act. The Forest Rights Act of 2006 has been a landmark act specifically to ensure the welfare of those who have been living in the forest area for many generations. In this video of the knowledge series today, we will be discussing about the important provisions of the Forest Rights Act. We'll be discussing what exactly happens under this, what are the rights given to the people who have been living in the forest. Also, are there some loopholes in this act, so on and so forth. All of this will be addressed in this session of the Forest Rights Act in this knowledge series. Now, as I discussed earlier, this Forest Rights Act, or as you say, the FRA, was an act passed in the year 2006. Now, let's first very quickly discuss what is the most basic feature of this act. What does it want to do? So, there has been a lot of people, big communities of people who have been living in forest in India for many generations. Those are called forest dwellers. The word dwellers means living somewhere, or dwell means to live. So there have been a lot of people, if you look at the history of India, who have been living in the forest. Many of them are tribals, many of them are even non-tribals, but they have been living in the forest for many generations. Now, to those people who have been living in the forest, the unfortunate part is that they don't have any ownership. Meaning that they don't have any official ownership record. So they don't have any document that says that this is their land or they are the owners of this land. The result is that these people who have been living in the forest for such a long time can be forcefully displaced. One day the government authorities can come, or let's say the other day some other corporate company can come in and they can force the people out of these lands, and they can do that because the people living there cannot prove that it is their land. If someone tomorrow comes to your house and says that no, you have to leave your house, what do? You show them the papers, right? That you are the owners of this land, and that is how you have the ownership. For those people who have been living in the forest for such a long time, the problem that they had was they did not have any proof of the ownership, despite living in the forest area for such a long time. So anything that they took from the forest, any fruit that they took, any timber or any kind of vegetation that they used from the forest, all of it was officially illegal. Although they were living in the forest for a long time, they did not have any ownership right. This is what this act wants to do. The Forest Rights Act, in very simple terms, will give ownership, will write in an official paper that yes, you are the owners of this land, so that tomorrow if someone comes in and tomorrow if someone wants to forcefully displace you out of that area, you can say that I have the ownership. You can say that I am the owner of this area and I will not go, and you can involve the police and the authorities. In simple terms, this is what this act is. It gives a right to ownership on the land where people have been living in the forest for a very long time. Not just giving ownership of the land. This law also gives a right to use forest resources. Some of the forest resources, the minor forest produce, etc., can be used by forest dwelling communities. As I said, forest dwelling means those who are living in the forest. The word dwell means to live or to reside. So those who have been residing in the forest for a very long time, they will be given this ownership right. Now, just imagine this. If the government has announced today, whoever is living in the land, we will give them the right to ownership of that land. Won't a lot of people all of a sudden start to say, oh, this is a scheme, let me also go and start living in the forest for 1 week. Then after that, I'll tell the government, now I am the owner of this land. Don't you think that will also happen? Because in India or anywhere around the world, people want to misuse the law whenever they want. So obviously when the government announces that whoever is living in that area will be given the ownership of that area. Everyone will now go in the forest, live for 1 week, 10 days and say we are the owners. For that, the government has given the responsibility to the Gram Sabha. I'm sure all of you would have read about the Gram Sabha in the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act when we read about the panchayats. Gram Sabha is a village assembly of all the voters. So everyone who is above 18, meaning that everyone who is officially a voter in the village, all of them together constitute what we call the Gram Sabha. They are the decision-making authority. The Gram Sabha of the village will decide whether or not the ownership will be given to the person or not, whether or not this family has been living in the forest for a long time or not. So the Gram Sabha will decide. Now, if you actually look at the background, or if you look at the history of how the forest rights and these kind of laws were introduced in India, you will see that it is since the time of the British that we had different types of forest acts or forest rights in India. However, the 2006 Forest Act is very different as compared to the earlier ones. Earlier, for any government, specifically the British government, forest meant a place from where they can exploit all the resources. Forest for many decades and many centuries have been the hub of resources for any government. The government has taken out timber, wood, vegetation resources. More importantly, they have extracted minerals from the forest land. So for any government throughout the decades, forests have been like a gold mine from where they can extract as much minerals as possible. They can give that land to the corporate sector to set up their factories and industries. In return, they can take a lot of money from the industrialists. That is how all the governments, unfortunately, have actually viewed their forests for a very, very long time. The 2006 Act, the Forest Rights Act that we are discussing, is different in the sense that they are the ones who are for the first time talking about the people who are living in that area. For a very long time, whenever we used to pass any law or any act regarding forest, we used to focus on which company can come here, how many mining activities can be done, how will the government use that land. But for the first time ever, the Forest Rights Act specifically focuses on the welfare of the people who have been living in that area, the forest dwellers. And that is why it is so significant. This, as I said, the earlier laws that were passed at the time of the British also were mainly about how to use the resources of the forest, were mainly about how exactly can we make the best use of the forest resources, give that land to big corporates and earn money in return. I'm sure all of you would have seen this Hasdeo Aranya issue that is going on in Chhattisgarh. Have you? Recently it was covered in the newspaper because the Chhattisgarh Legislative Assembly saw a private member resolution pass. There is a big protest going on in Chhattisgarh. One of the biggest forests of Chhattisgarh, it is the Hasdeo Aranya. I'm sure all of you would have heard of it in the newspapers. The land in these forests is actually being given to the companies to come and extract coal for coal mining. And the people here are protesting that no, we will not allow this to happen. These are the kind of laws and initiatives that have been taken for forests for a long time. The governments want to extract those resources, give this land to the corporate sector, and that is what the Forest Rights Act is now trying to improve. The Forest Rights Act, as I said, gives the ownership of the land to people who have been living here. Now just imagine practically, when the government is saying that, okay, we will give you the ownership right on the land where you are living, there has to be a limit to it, right? It can't be that the government will give an entire village to a family because they say we are living here. It can't be that the government can give a lot of land to someone because this way everyone will say I want this much land or that much land. So whenever these kind of laws are passed, obviously there has to be certain limit that up to this limit of land can be given to a family. This law says forest dwellers will be given ownership subjected to 4 hectares maximum. Please do understand this. 4 hectares is the limit. This is the maximum amount of land whose ownership will be transferred. Also, this is per family. This is not per individual. This is per family. only on the land where they have been living for a long time. That will be the land given to them, not any new land. So tomorrow if they say, no, that land is also ours, that is also good land, no. Only the land where they have been living. Second, what do they have from here, or what can they take advantage of? They can use or they can extract minor forest produce, grazing areas, etc. Now, minor forest produce, basically there are government laws that specifically tell what are the minor forest produce, what are the major forest produce. Just to give an example, the major forest produce are the minerals, for example, coal, etc. If, let's say, within that forest there is a coal mine, a potential coal mine, then the people living in the forest do not have the right to extract coal, because that is not a minor forest produce. Minor forest produce mostly is related to vegetation, fruits, vegetables, etc. If they are grown in the forest, that will come under minor forest produce, which can be used by the people. The people of that area can also use this area for grazing of their own cattle, etc. that they own. Apart from that, in case of illegal eviction, or if anyone is forcefully displaced from that area, the government will also help them out. The government authorities will ensure that no one forcefully takes them out of this area. Then, the forest management rights, it includes the rights to protect, conserve, manage any community forest resources which have been given to these people for sustainable use. So the people who have been living here are allowed to use these forest lands for their own livelihood and for their own sustenance. Now, the biggest question that you should have is, who can claim this? Because as I said, it's very common. Let's say today the government passes this law that whoever is living in the forest, we will give them this land. On hearing this news, many people can shift to the forest. Many people can say that I will live in the forest for 1 week or 10 days, and then I will say I am the owner of this land, give the ownership to me. The government obviously cannot allow this to happen. This is very, very obvious. So there has to be a certain qualification who are eligible to get land under this particular scheme. So the criteria is those people who depend on the forest and the forest land for their livelihood needs, number one. So most of their livelihood has to come from the forest resources only. Second, the most important one, any member or community should have been living in the forest for at least 3 generations, that is at least 75 years prior to the day that this act actually was passed, 13th December 2005. Before this day, at least for 75 years, you should have been living in the forest. Now, this is where it gets slightly confusing. The authority to decide whether the land will be given to the community or not is the Gram Sabha. So Gram Sabha has to decide whether a family who claims to be living here for 75 years, whether they were living here for 75 years or not. How do you decide that? Because usually when you have to decide who is living where for how much time, you go with the paperwork only, but there is no paperwork involved here. That is the entire point of the law. So how to prove that 75 years have completed or have not completed, that is also a major point of contention. Then, as I said, the Gram Sabha is the authority to initiate the process for this. So anyone who wants to get the ownership, it's not that government will come to your house. If you are the one living in the forest, you want to get the ownership, then you would have to go and you will have to apply to the Gram Sabha for the ownership transfer, and the Gram Sabha will then decide the matter. Now, as you know, what is the Gram Sabha? Gram Sabha is the village assembly of all the voters, of all the adults. Everyone above 18 years of age, they collectively sit, which is called the Gram Sabha. Remember, this is not Gram Panchayat. Panchayat is the people who have been elected. Gram Sabha is all the people who are adults, all the 18 plus people, they together are called the Gram Sabha. So they decide. Now, it might also happen that a family, let's assume, goes to the Gram Sabha and says we want the ownership of the land to be given to us. The Gram Sabha may decide that no, you are not living in this area, it's a false claim. Now the question is, can the family do something else? If a family's claim has been rejected by the Gram Sabha, what other option do they have? This is also one important provision. The other option that they have is that there will be a committee that will be formed called the district level committee. This district level committee will have 6 members, 3 from the government side who are government officers and 3 people who are elected representatives from that particular village. These people together, these 6 people together will form a committee, and these 6 people together will then decide if any claims have to be reversed as compared to what the Gram Sabha decided. So if Gram Sabha did not give the right of ownership or did give the right of ownership and someone has appealed, this committee will hear the appeals and this committee will then decide whether or not we actually have to take up this claim further or not. Also, anyone, as I said, who thinks that their appeal to Gram Sabha has not been heard, they can go to the committee. And finally, the land does not allow, or the Act does not allow the land to be transferred or sold. This is also very important. If you as a family have been given, let's say, 4 hectares or 3 hectares of land, after getting ownership of the land, you cannot then sell it to someone else to earn a profit. You cannot transfer it to someone else to earn a profit. This is not for your economic profit. This is just so that you have a proper permanent place to live and no one is here to forcefully displace you out of that area. So this land cannot be sold or cannot be transferred. Now it was in the news very recently, that is September 2021, so almost a year ago, that Jammu and Kashmir will also implement the Forest Rights Act. So Jammu and Kashmir, till the time it was a complete state, did not come under this. After Jammu Kashmir got converted to Union Territory, there were a lot of laws that gradually started to be implemented in Jammu and Kashmir also. And now even this Forest Rights Act will now be implemented in Jammu and Kashmir, that does have a sizable tribal population that is very much connected to the forest area and they live in those areas. Now, the very obvious advantage of passing this law, the Forest Rights Act, is the people who have been living in the forest, who don't have any official ownership record, who don't really have any official paperwork to show for their ownership, at least they will get this advantage that they will have a proper ownership to show. Apart from that also, there are other significance attached to that as well. For example, you would have read about the 5th and the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution that talks about how the indigenous community, how the tribes that are living in that community should have the right to decide about their land, should have the right to decide how the local community or the local government will run. Giving this right of official ownership of land is a one step ahead in realizing the true provisions of the 5th and the 6th schedule. So it empowers the 5th and the 6th schedule areas in such a way that the tribals living in these areas or even non-tribals who have been living in the forest finally get the rights that they deserve. Security concerns. We have seen one of the biggest internal security issues that India has faced since our independence has been the Naxalite movement. The reason why the Naxalite movement still is ongoing is because of a lot of support that the Naxal leaders get from the local community, a lot of them who actually live in the forest. Now this is where it gets interesting. The reason why a lot of people living in the forest have no option but to support the Naxal leaders is because people who are living in the forest believe that the government is not in their favor. They believe that their rights, they believe that their land is actually overtaken by the government and given to the corporate sector. That is the narrative that most of the Naxal leaders actually build. When they come to villages, when they try to convince people to join the Naxal movement, their entire pitch is that, see, the government is not taking care of you. See, the government is taking away your land, giving it to the rich people, giving it to the corporates. You don't have any power. Join us and we will respond to the government from your side. That is the entire pitch of the government to attract people towards the Naxal movement. By doing this, by actually giving the official right of ownership to the people who are living in the forest. Government is actually ensuring that the people who are influenced by the Naxal leaders, at least their influence will be reduced. So that also is something that the government is planning to achieve through this act. Then forest governance. See, for any government, it is important to make the best use of the forest resources. Forests at the end of the day have a lot of importance. They have economic importance, there's a lot of forest produce that you have. They also have a lot of environmental importance. There have been movements across the world against cutting down of forest trees. Till now, because no one officially held the ownership of the forest land, there was no one who could actually have the responsibility to take care of that land. Now that the government has fixed ownership, now that the government has said that you are responsible for this piece of land or you are responsible for that piece of land, that means the government is actually ensuring that there is someone who is responsible for taking care of that land. So government is in a way reducing its own responsibility and ensuring that there are enough people to take care of these forests, those who have turned to be the owners of these forests. So they will be held. These are some of the important significance of this act. Just like any other act, this act also has its own share of loopholes, its own share of weaknesses. Let's see what are those. The first, administrative apathy. In most states across the country, and this is a very unfortunate thing, but the reality is, India has never been short of good laws. We have always had good laws for most of the communities. The problem always comes with the implementation part of these laws. The same is the case here. Yes, on paper, the people living in the forest will be given the right to ownership. However, whenever you talk about the implementation of the laws, usually you would see that the governments only implement those laws which help the government in getting a lot of votes. As long as the tribal community, as long as the people who are living in the villages don't act as a big vote bank for a political party, these kind of acts are not really implemented well. The implementation lacks, and this Forest Rights Act is not seeing great implementation because the forest bureaucracy is a lot of times misinterpreting the law. You have to understand, the people living in the forest, when they come and try to claim the ownership right, most of them are not educated. Most of them do not know how the law works, what are the important provisions of the law. So for bureaucrats who want to find loopholes, or for bureaucrats who want to deny the right to ownership, they can actually do that by giving a lot of excuses, and this is what is actually happening. The other problem is dilution of this act. So many people say that some people in the community will be given the right of ownership because they will be able to prove that we have been living here. Some other people who are not able to prove, they will not get any ownership of the land. So in effect, what will happen is there will be a lot of disparity that will actually result as a consequence of this act. Some people will become owners of the land, some people will not, because to prove that you have been living here for 3 generations, to prove that you have been living here for at least 75 years, and then for the Gram Sabha to accept your claim, it's also a matter of chance. Some people might like it, some people might not like it. So this actually creates more disparity. There are some roadblocks also, because as I said, the Gram Sabha will decide, but decide on the basis of what? A lot of these local maps that we have of the forest area are actually rough maps of the community. Now in a map, if I draw this line, if I'm just drawing a line with a pen, this is a thick line. Now in reality, this thick line may result into 5 to 10 meters of real land. So who will get ownership of what land? Where does this one boundary end? Where does the second boundary begin? Because these are rough maps and not digital maps, not accurate, there are also concerns that people might not be happy with the division of that. The people might not be happy about how exactly is the land divided between the two. Apart from that, we also have misuse of the land which is actually coming up. For example, the Forest Rights Act has also seen that a lot of people who are living in the forest, or the people who are actually powerful amongst those who are actually living in the forest, they are the ones who get their ownership while the others do not. So it's not really helping each and everyone equally. We are seeing that some people who are living in the villages, who are actually powerful people, who have a rich background, they are able to get their own ownership, but the others are not able to get it. So that also is a problem that we have been seeing. Now, as with many other acts, this is a well-intentioned act, but the devil lies in the details. The devil lies in the implementation of this act. We have never been short of good laws. It is the implementation part that decides how this act will actually prove to be successful or unsuccessful. Let me see a few questions that have been given here. I have already answered about the minor forest produce and the major forest produce. Minor forest produce mainly are the ones which are usually vegetative resources. Major forest produce are the major minerals like coal, etc. Then I have a question, what about nomadic tribes? See, nomadic tribes don't want any ownership. The entire concept of nomadic tribes are that they don't settle anywhere. The purpose of having this law, the purpose of giving ownership of this law is to ensure that people who are living in a certain area, those are not forcefully displaced. Those are not forcefully displaced, and that is why these are the areas under which people are given their ownership right. Nomadic tribes anyways don't settle in one particular place. Since they don't settle in one particular place, they are not really covered under this. As we said, you have to be settled in that area for at least 3 generations. Then I have a question on latest amendment. No latest amendments have been introduced. As I said, the latest news about this is that Jammu and Kashmir will also have implementation of this particular law. Okay. Then I have a question, how come center is enacting such laws when the land is a state list area? Because it comes under forest. So forest is not in the state list, and that is why the central government can also come under this and enact this. Because the same question you can ask, how is it that the central government is giving coal mine allocation? The coal mine allocation means allocating a piece of land and giving the permission to companies to extract coal. How is that happening? Because that, again, that comes under the central government. Okay. Then I have one more question. What if there are 2 communities having claim on the same piece of land? As I said, whatever claims are made, the Gram Sabha will decide. So Gram Sabha is obviously people who have been living in that village only. So they know the local population, they know who is telling the truth, who is telling the lie. So Gram Sabha has been made the first body. If you are not happy with their decision, then you go and appeal in the district committee. As I discussed, the district committee that will handle all the appeals will have 6 members, 3 from the government side and 3 elected by the villagers only. So that is how these claims will be decided. Any claim that is made by one person, by multiple people, any confusion in the claims will be handled by the Gram Sabha only. If that they are not satisfied, they can go to the committee, the district committee will then decide. Okay, perfect. This brings me to the end of the major questions that I had for this particular act. I hope this solves a lot of doubts and you get a lot more clarity on this particular act and how it works. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like the video, do hit the like button. Do share this with the other friends of yours also who are preparing for the UPSC Civil Service examination. As you know, this knowledge series is a live class that you get on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday at 8 p.m. where you get to interact with us, ask all your doubts on some of the most important static topics from different subjects of the UPSC Civil Service examination. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye.